This is the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose, where I strategize with business owners on how to grow and scale their businesses to hit their income goals. This is episode 277 of the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose. Today, I'm speaking with Rachel Gaynor, and we're talking about having an abundance versus scarcity mindset in business. This is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I even continue to learn something every single time I research this topic, and even more so when I just had this conversation with Rachel. You're definitely going to want to listen in. Now, before we jump into it, I want to make sure that if you haven't already grabbed my Scaling for Growth guide, that you make sure that you do so. I talk a little bit about mindset in that guide, and it's really going to be connected to this conversation that we have, because when you are not dealing with your burnout, it is likely that it will happen. So just send me a DM on Instagram asking for the Scaling for Growth guide at Jenny_Melrose, and I will send that over to you. I am still also offering the content marketing audit. So if you haven't taken advantage of that, all you have to do is leave a rating and review on your favorite podcasting app. Send me a screenshot on Instagram at Jenny_Melrose, and I will do a content marketing audit. And all that is I'm looking at your website, your social media channels, and giving you recommendations on how you can improve the content that you are putting out there and making sure that it is connected to scaling your business. All right, you guys, let's dive into this conversation with Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Of course. I am so excited to be able to talk to you more because I actually had the privilege of meeting you at Tastemakers in Chicago, which it was so nice to actually get in person and to, of course, meet you.
It was so fun to gather and to get to meet new people face to face for the first time in forever. It was really wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. So will you introduce yourself and your business before we really dive into this conversation?
Absolutely. So my name is Rachel Gaynor. I'm an executive life coach. And what that means is that I help women who are building their businesses, both emerging and established entrepreneurs, generally, solopreneurs, but also women who are, even women who are working in the corporate world, but are, at the C-level executives. So I work primarily with women on kind of the emotional aspects of building a business, a lot of that imposter complex, inner critic, the things that really hold us back. And we generally start with, the reason I call it like executive life coaching is because generally speaking, we start with business stuff, but it always leads to what's underneath, which is the personal stuff. So I help people on both sides.
Excellent. I love that because I do feel like it is so tied to the personal side of things often as well, especially if you don't have that support or need to get that support and communicate it with your partner and significant other. So I just find that so important. We're going to talk about the difference between abundance versus scarcity mindset. So let's start with, what does it mean to have a scarcity mindset?
Okay, so scarcity mindset has basically three elements. The first is a focus on what you lack. It's kind of a fixation on like not enough. And you might say, I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough followers, or I don't know enough people in the industry. It can, we think of scarcity often with money, but it shows up in so many other areas of our lives. So kind of listening for that key phrase, like when you're saying not enough, that's kind of one of the primary things. The second thing is kind of a belief that resources are limited or only available to a really small elite group of people. And I think one of the ways that I like to think of this is like beauty, for example, like that only an elite few people can be really beautiful. But I really believe that we all have beauty in our lives, but we can kind of get this really narrow scarcity mindset around things like that. And that can make us feel really, really competitive and have like this sense of urgency, like, oh, I've got to get mine, right? Like there's only so much of the pie. There's only so much money out there. There's only so many opportunities out there, and I've got to get mine or I'll miss out. So it's kind of that kind of belief and attitude. And then the third element is a little more subtle, and it's kind of this belief that more is always better, but without really understanding why more is desired or more is it even necessary? Like, so it's kind of just this like pervasive feeling of chasing more, and we kind of live in this consumerism, and we're kind of conditioned to feel like more is always better. Like I always need more of everything. So those are kind of the three elements that I like to focus on when I'm talking about scarcity mindset. And just to clarify, when we're talking about scarcity mindset, it really is about the mindset. Like I don't want to pretend that poverty or limited financial resources or difficult circumstances don't exist in this world. They absolutely do. But people who are in those circumstances can still have an abundant mindset. And I often do have a very abundant mindset. And people who have what seems to be everything on paper can live from a lot of scarcity. So it's really, it's about how we're living and approaching what we have, not about, what the balance sheet looks like, if that makes sense. I just want to be really respectful of those who are in a place of suffering and struggle right now.
Yes, no, absolutely makes a ton of sense. And I love the way that you broke down the three different aspects, because I think a lot of people hear scarcity and they immediately go to the first one that you said, right? Not thinking that, or even the second with it being competitive. But I see myself often in that third of I set a goal, and then the second I set the goal, I don't celebrate that or revel in it. Mm-hmm. And then it's the next thing, pushing it to the next level. And I think I have a lot of conversations with clients about that they just don't take the time to then tie it into their purpose of what they're actually trying to accomplish with their business and being happy with what they actually have. So You briefly brought up abundance. You said it as having that abundance mindset. What is an abundance mindset?
So this is where, a lot of people think, oh, abundance mindset, that just means I'm like magnetically attracting everything and more than I could ever need. And I hope that you do attract more than you ever need. I really do want that for my clients and the people that I work with. But for me, I've really learned that abundance is about appreciating what we have and learning to make it work for us based on our priorities. So it's really like starting with what you have and believing what I have is enough to get started, and I am enough to get started. So that has totally shifted my perspective on what it means to be abundant. It's really about sufficiency. Like what I have is sufficient. And so, I think that's really surprising to a lot of people, this idea that what you have is already enough to begin.
Yes. And sufficient is such a good word to describe it. Because I think, like you said, abundant, a lot of people just assume, oh, I'm trying to get more. I just believe I'm going to attract it to me and we're all going to be happy and that's going to be it. So how do we actually change our scarcity mindset to one of abundance?
Yeah, this is a great question. So it's a process. First, we have to recognize where we're feeling a sense of scarcity. And scarcity is so deeply tied to fear. It's a fear-based mindset that comes up. And a lot of times in the area that we're feeling scarce, for example, time, we may be tying that time to a sense of productivity, which we're tying to a sense of self-worth. And so sometimes what happens is our mind, that inner critic, that fear in our hearts comes up and says, oh, you don't have enough time, which means you can't be productive enough, which means you won't be successful. So it's kind of this tumbling feeling of the scarcity mindset. And so the very first step is to recognize when the inner critic is showing up. And one of the inner critic's favorite phrases is not enough. So anytime that you hear that phrase, like, or say that phrase, not enough, like, I don't have enough time, like, that is just a time that we can pause and recognize, okay, like, I'm feeling a scarcity mindset right now. I'm experiencing scarcity. And when we just can begin to acknowledge it, recognize it, we can kind of stop that tumbling, right? So the very first step is to recognize it. The second step that we want to do is to practice just being really compassionate with ourselves. Like, we recognize it, we pause, and then we offer ourselves a lot of compassion, because scarcity is a mindset of fear, and fear is very normal, especially when you're building a business, right? And when you're building a business, like, it is scary. You're doing new things that you haven't done before. And when we do new things, we're in a space of growth, right? We're trying to expand our knowledge. We're trying to expand our capacity. And so we're going to be living right at the edge of our abilities. And when we're living right at the edge of our abilities, we're going to feel a little nervous. That's normal. That is, and just recognizing, like, with yourself, like, this is so normal, right? It is 100% normal for me to feel this sense of fear. So first, recognize it, acknowledge that the fear is present, that it's normal, give yourself some love and compassion. Like, I know this is really, really hard. It is hard to stretch yourself. It does feel really scary to do this. And then the next step is to invite yourself into that abundance mindset, which is to say, okay, I have enough, right? I have enough time to do this one task, right? I have enough money to invest this amount in my business. I have enough of a network that I can put myself out there to this handful of people, right? So, I have enough energy, right? Energy is another one that comes up a lot, but I have enough energy to do this one thing. And so it's about kind of creating the habit of believing that what we have is sufficient to get started. And then we just practice that over and over again. And as you practice that kind of 3 steps, the identifying it, offering compassion, and then inviting into abundance, what we're doing is we're actually building a new neural pathway. So when we're in scarcity, it's like the habit, our mind's habit is to go to scarcity of not enough. And what we're trying to do is create a new habit of abundance. And you do that over and over and over and over again.
I love the way that you talked about it's that uncomfortable feeling, right? You said that. Like, and a lot of times I feel like business owners feel that and they're like, no, they're going to back away from the edge of the cliff. When I think, honestly, sometimes you have to leap a little bit and do the things that make you uncomfortable. I think you were in the room when I admitted to the fact that I tried to get out of going to Tastemakers like 2 days prior, because the introvert in me very much started to freak out at the fact that I haven't been in front of people. I haven't traveled. I haven't been away from my family. And I was so uncomfortable, but it was an amazing experience. And it was so beneficial for my business, for my own personal, to be able to be back out there, being independent of my children and my husband, and being able to make new connections with some amazing women.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's most interesting to think about when it comes to scarcity and abundance is the difference in the way that we show up when we have a scarcity mindset versus an abundant mindset. So when we're living in a scarcity mindset, for example, we overthink things, right? We procrastinate. We hoard our resources because there's not enough to go around, right? We can get competitive. We can overwork and lead to burnout, get really like into perfectionism. And then we can do kind of what you were talking about, which is self-sabotage, right? Have those feelings of, oh no, I should back out of this, right? And that's one that I do too all the time. And so it's really easy to be like, oh, well, if I'm afraid, then I shouldn't do this. But actually, like, fear is that signal of like, no, you're living like right at the edge of your capacity. This you're afraid because this means something to you. This is important to you. And because it's important to you, the risk feels big and it feels heavy. And so you're actually like living towards your dream. You're living into your greatest potential when you're right at the edge of your capacity. When we're always comfortable, we're not growing. We're not growing ourselves. We're not growing our businesses. So it's when we get to that edge that we're actually going to expand and grow. And taking that leap feels so scary. But once we've crossed that threshold, like, right, once you're in front of the audience, you're like, actually, it feels awesome to be here. It feels so great. And that's the difference with abundance mindset. When we're living from abundance of I have enough, I am enough, we feel this sense of appreciation. We show up joyfully and serve like our people, right? Our community, as business owners, we're serving, we're giving freely, we're collaborating, we're doing the best work that we can in the time, with the time and resources we have, but we're not fixating on all those little mistakes. And like I said, like part of getting to abundance is compassion. So we're also practicing really good self-talk. We're being compassionate. We're recognizing, yeah, I might make mistakes. I might not get this 100% right. When we feel that urge to sabotage and run away, instead we stay, we lean in. So the way that we show up when we're feeling scarcity versus abundance is just it's a different energy that you bring to your work.
Yes. I think it's noticeable, not only by ourselves, but often by others, whether it is something like speaking in front of people or creating a new product or putting together some sort of virtual event or bundle or whatever that might look like for our listeners. Maybe it's doing reels and you actually have tried it and feel comfortable doing it. Maybe it's TikTok, whatever that might look like, just re-examining it, that it's the right fit for your business and not being scared of making the mistakes, of just letting it be out there and see how people respond and learn from it to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
So
and that scarcity mindset, that not enough mindset, the entire purpose of that for your inner critic is to keep you stuck, to keep you from taking action. You kind of referenced this a little bit earlier, but this idea of like, it's always a moving target, right? Like I'll be enough when what I have is enough, I'll have enough time when I quit my job and make this my full-time work. But really, when we don't appreciate and use well what we have, then we actually we don't actually have the skills to do that when we have more. So it's this idea that moving target, we want to stop that from happening so that if we're enough now, then, that inner critic can't keep telling us, you're not enough, it's not enough, you don't have enough. Because it's whatever I have now is enough,
Right. Sufficient. Yes. So why is abundance a choice?
Yes. So abundance is a choice. Most like at first, it may feel like it's not a choice, right? That feeling of those thoughts, they're habitual. And when we're familiar with the idea of habits, like physical habits, like brushing our teeth, buckling up in the car. These are habits that we form from a very young age. Well, we also create emotional habits, thought habits. And so at first, it doesn't feel like a choice, right? At first, we're like, well, this is just how my brain works. But actually, when we create that awareness that we talked about, that first step of creating awareness and create this pause, right? Then we actually have this like option A is to do what I've always done, to think the way I've always thought. But option B is to lean into that abundance mindset and create it. And it goes back to that idea of creating a new neural pathway, a different way for our brain to think. So it's a choice because even though it feels natural to think one way, we actually can reframe and redesign our thoughts if we do it consciously. So that's why that awareness is the first step, and then kind of creating that pause where we can make a choice of which way we're going to think and which way we're going to act.
So how does an abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset impact businesses?
This is great. This goes back a little bit to what I was saying about the way that we show up, first of all. But when we show up with some of those behaviors of scarcity, like we're hoarding, we don't collaborate, we're scared, we're perfectionists, we overthink, like it slows down our progress in business, right? So we're not, instead, like we want one specific opportunity that doesn't feel available to us right now. So we miss all the opportunities that are already in our purview, right? So scarcity mindset kind of keeps us fixated on what we don't have. And abundance mindset allows us to start focusing on what we do have, what is available to us, what am I capable of, who do I know, how much time do I have, what can I accomplish in that time, what skills can I translate from one area of my life to another. And it keeps us from spinning our wheels. So when it comes to business, the scarcity mindset keeps you stuck, going back to that, like you're not enough, so don't get started. Right? Like the whole goal of that mindset is stay stuck. And the goal of the abundance mindset is make a little bit of progress every day, just a little tiny step in the right direction. So you're on the right trajectory of where you want to get long term. So it's about creating that momentum and that movement in your business where scarcity keeps us static and abundance helps us move.
So much sense. I love it. Rachel, where are the best places to connect with you? Because you have such an articulate way of speaking. You have such a soothing way of speaking. Where can they connect with you?
Thank you so much, Jenny. That's so kind of you. So the best place to find me is on my website, rachelrebuilt.com. And that's where I offer one-on-one coaching opportunities. And I actually offer a free one-on-one session to anybody who is interested. So if there's something you're working on, whether it's abundance mindset or inner critic or other kind of professional development, that would be a place that you could reach out to me. I am on Instagram at Rachel_rebuilt. I don't post there super often, but if you direct message me there, you can reach me there. And then I also have a podcast called Life Rebuilt. And it's kind of on hold right now, but there's a lot of great content there that people could listen to that talks more about other ways that we develop our mindset.
Well, we are definitely going to link to those in the show notes. Rachel, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to speak with me and my audience.
Oh, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to come on today.
All right, you guys, how many of you were shaking your head going, oh my goodness, that's so me. I so sometimes have a scarcity mindset and need to fix it to make it an abundant mindset. Yep, raising my hand over here because as you heard in that episode, I have a habit of doing that last one, always feeling like I got to reach the next goal. So I'm hoping that you will take the steps that Rachel talked about in order to have a better abundance mindset and put those into practice. Like I said in the beginning, we always appreciate when you leave a rating review, and I'm giving you a free content marketing audit. When you do so, send a screenshot of your rating and review to @Jenny_Melrose on Instagram, and I will do a free content marketing audit. All right, you guys, until next time, I will see you all then.